The blood-curdling thunder of 1,000 hooves shook the earth as Eleanor Adams sprinted across the plains of Fort Davis, Texas. The skirt of her powder blue dress clutched in white-knuckled fists, her lungs burning with the desperate need for air. It was 1872, and what had started as a peaceful day collecting wildflowers along the edges of her family's ranch had turned into a fight for her life. The cattle had appeared without warning, a storm of horns and muscle cresting the hill to the north. Eleanor had heard stories about stampedes, how they could turn the most docile herd into an unstoppable force of nature, but nothing prepared her for the reality of it. The ground trembled beneath her boots as she ran, her long auburn hair whipping behind her like a flag in a hurricane. "Move, girl," shouted a voice from somewhere to her right, but the words were swept away in the din of the stampede. Eleanor's feet caught on a rock and she stumbled, pitching forward onto the hard, packed earth. Pain lanced through her side as she scrambled to rise, but her limbs refused to cooperate. She looked up to see the leading edge of the herd bearing down on her, massive beasts with wild eyes and gleaming horns. In that moment, she was certain she would die. Then something struck her from the side, not a cow, but a man. Strong arms wrapped around her waist and lifted her bodily from the ground. The world tilted and spun as she was thrown over the back of a horse, the animal's muscles bunching beneath her as it leaped forward. Eleanor clung to the saddle horn, her vision blurring as pain radiated from her side. She glimpsed her savior broad shoulders in a worn leather vest, a flash of sandy blonde hair beneath a dusty hat before darkness crept in from the edges of her vision. "Hold on, miss," the man shouted over his shoulder, his voice deep and steady despite the chaos surrounding them. But Eleanor couldn't hold on. The darkness swallowed her whole and she slumped forward, consciousness fleeing as blood soaked through her dress. When she opened her eyes again, the world was quiet. She lay on something soft, a bedroll, she realized, spread across the floor of what appeared to be a small cabin. The ceiling above her was rough-hewn timber, and golden light from an oil lamp danced across the wooden beams. "You're awake." The voice came from her right, and Eleanor turned her head to see a man sitting beside her, a basin of water at his feet and bloodied cloth in his hands. He was handsome in a rugged way, with features carved by sun and wind, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, and eyes the color of a summer sky. His shirt sleeves were rolled to the elbows, revealing corded forearms tanned by long days under the Texas sun. "Who?" Her voice emerged as a croak, her throat parched. "Quinn Atwood," he replied, setting aside the cloth and reaching for a tin cup. "Most folks call me Quinn." He slipped a gentle hand beneath her head, lifting it so she could drink. The water was cool and sweet against her dry lips, and Eleanor drank greedily until the cup was empty. "Thank you," she murmured, wincing as pain sliced through her side when she tried to shift positions. She glanced down to see that her dress had been replaced by a man's shirt that swallowed her small frame. Bandages wrapped around her midsection, visible beneath the borrowed garment. A flush of embarrassment warmed her cheeks. "You were hurt pretty bad," Quinn explained, following her gaze to the bandages. "Caught by a hoof, I reckon, had to stitch you up." Eleanor's eyes widened. "You stitched me?" Quinn nodded, his expression solemn. "7 stitches, my pa taught me. He was a doctor before we came west." He hesitated. "I hope you don't mind about the dress. It was ruined with blood and I needed to tend your wound." She should have been scandalized. A strange man had undressed her, seen her in her undergarments, touched her bare skin as he tended her injury. But all she felt was gratitude and something else, something warm that bloomed in her chest as she looked at his concerned face. "You saved my life," she said softly. "I can hardly be upset about a ruined dress." Relief softened his features. "What's your name, Miss?" "Eleanor Adams." "My family's ranch is about 5 miles east of town." "The double A," he said with a nod of recognition. "Your father is Andrew Adams. You know him." "Everyone knows Andrew Adams." There was something in his tone she couldn't quite identify. "I work at the Broken Spur, foreman now." Eleanor recognized the name of the neighboring ranch, owned by the Blackwell family. Her father and old man Blackwell had been at odds for years over water rights and property boundaries. "I should get word to my family," she said, attempting to sit up. Pain lanced through her side and she gasped, falling back onto the bedroll. "Easy," Quinn cautioned, his hand on her shoulder. "That wound needs time to heal. I sent one of the Broken Spur boys to your ranch with news that you're safe but hurt. Said you'd be staying here until you're well enough to travel." "Here," Eleanor glanced around the small cabin. "Where is here exactly?" "Line shack at the western edge of Broken Spur land. I was checking fences when I spotted the Stampede." His eyes darkened with memory. "Nearly didn't get to you in time." "But you did," she said softly. "Thank you," Quinn shrugged, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Any man would have done the same." "Perhaps, but it wasn't any man, it was you." Their eyes met and something electric passed between them. Quinn cleared his throat and stood, moving to the small stove in the corner of the cabin. "You should eat something. I've got stew." As he ladled the fragrant mixture into a tin bowl, Eleanor studied him covertly. He moved with an easy grace that belied his size, confident and sure in his motions. He was older than her 20 years. She guessed perhaps 28 or 30, with the weathered look of a man who'd spent his life outdoors. "Can you sit up if I help you?" he asked, returning with the bowl. "I think so." With gentle hands, he helped her into a sitting position, arranging blankets behind her back for support. The pain in her side was sharp but manageable, and the smell of the stew made her stomach rumble with hunger she hadn't realized she felt. "How long was I unconscious?" she asked as he handed her the bowl. "Almost a full day. It's near sunset now. You lost a fair amount of blood." Eleanor ate slowly, savoring the rich flavor of the stew. "This is delicious. Trail cooking, nothing fancy." "Better than anything our cook makes at the ranch," she assured him, and was rewarded with a small smile that transformed his face, softening the hard lines and making him look younger. "Your father will likely be here by morning," Quinn said, turning to stoke the fire. "I imagine he'll want to move you back to the double as soon as possible." There was something in his voice, resignation, perhaps. Eleanor realized with a start that she didn't want to leave. The thought was absurd. She barely knew this man, and she certainly shouldn't be alone with him in a remote cabin. Her mother would be horrified at the impropriety of the situation, and yet she felt safe with Quinn Atwood in a way she couldn't explain. "Tell me about yourself," she said, changing the subject. "How did you come to work for the Broken Spur?" Quinn settled back in his chair, stretching his long legs before him. "Not much to tell. My family came west from Virginia when I was 15. Pa set up as a doctor in Fort Davis for a spell, but he took sick 3 years later. Consumption. After he passed, my ma went back east to live with her sister. I stayed on, worked odd jobs until I hired on at the Broken Spur as a hand." His shoulder lifted in a shrug. "Been there 8 years now, and you're foreman now," Eleanor said. "That's impressive for a man your age." A corner of his mouth quirked up. "Old Blackwell values hard work and loyalty. I gave him both." "No wife?" The question slipped out before she could stop it, and Eleanor blushed. "I'm sorry, that was forward of me." Quinn didn't seem offended. "No wife," he confirmed. "Ranch life doesn't leave much time for courting, and most ladies in town aren't keen on a man who smells of horse and cattle." "Their loss," Eleanor said, then blushed deeper when she realized how her words might be interpreted. Quinn's eyes crinkled at the corners. "What about you, Miss Adams?" "No suitors lined up at your door," she shook her head. "My father is protective, and most men are more interested in the double than in me." "Then they're fools." The words hung in the air between them, charged with meaning neither of them was ready to acknowledge. Eleanor broke the gaze first, looking down at her empty bowl. "I should rest," she said softly. Quinn nodded, taking the bowl from her hands. "Of course." He helped her lie back down, his touch gentle but impersonal now, as if he'd caught himself stepping over a line and retreated. Eleanor felt the loss keenly, though she had no right to. "I'll be right here if you need anything," he said, settling back in his chair. "Try to sleep." Eleanor closed her eyes, listening to the soft sounds of Quinn moving about the cabin, banking the fire for the night, washing the dishes. It was strangely domestic, oddly comforting. As she drifted toward sleep, she wondered what it would be like to hear those sounds every night, to know that Quinn Atwood was never far from her side. The thought should have alarmed her. Instead, it followed her into dreams filled with summer skies the exact color of a cowboy's eyes. Morning brought the sound of approaching horses, and her father's booming voice calling her name. Eleanor awoke with a start, pain shooting through her side at the sudden movement. Quinn was already at the door, opening it to reveal Andrew Adams, red-faced and imposing in his black coat despite the Texas heat. "Where is my daughter?" Andrew demanded, brushing past Quinn into the cabin. "Papa," Eleanor called, attempting to sit up. Quinn moved quickly to her side, supporting her with a strong arm around her shoulders. Andrew's eyes narrowed at the sight of them together, at Quinn's arm around his daughter, at her wearing what was clearly a man's shirt. "What is the meaning of this?" he thundered. "Get your hands off my daughter, Atwood." "Papa, please," Eleanor protested. "Mr. Atwood saved my life. The Stampede, I know about the Stampede." Andrew cut her off. "What I want to know is why my daughter has been kept here instead of being brought home where she belongs." Quinn's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "She was badly injured, Mr. Adams. Moving her risked reopening the wound. I sent word to you immediately." "A convenient excuse," Andrew sneered. "A broken spur man alone with my daughter for a day and night. Do you take me for a fool?" "You've compromised her reputation, Papa." Eleanor's cheeks burned with embarrassment. "Mr. Atwood has been nothing but a gentleman. He stitched my wound and cared for me. I would likely be dead if not for him." Andrew seemed unmoved by her defense. "Get your things, we're leaving now." "She shouldn't be moved yet," Quinn insisted, his arm still supporting Eleanor. "The stitches need time to set." "I'll be the judge of what my daughter needs," Andrew snapped. He turned to the men who had accompanied him, three double a ranch hands hovering uncertainly in the doorway. "Johnson, help Miss Eleanor to the wagon. We've brought a proper dress for her to change into." Quinn's arm tightened briefly around Eleanor's shoulders before he released her, stepping back to allow the ranch hand to approach. His face was carefully blank, but she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands curled into fists at his sides. "Thank you for everything, Mr. Atwood," she said formally, aware of her father's watchful gaze. Quinn inclined his head. "Just doing what needed to be done, Miss Adams." The ranch hand helped her to her feet, and pain shot through her side at the movement. She gasped, clutching at the wound, and immediately Quinn was there, supporting her other side despite Andrew's glare. "See, she's in no condition to travel," Quinn insisted. "She'll be fine once we get her home to a proper doctor," Andrew retorted. "At least let her ride in the wagon instead of on horseback," Quinn pleaded. "And go slow over the rough ground." Andrew's eyes narrowed, but he nodded curtly. "Of course, I'm not a barbarian, Atwood. I want what's best for my daughter." Eleanor was helped into the small bedroom area of the cabin to change into the dress her father had brought. The movement was agony, and by the time she emerged, pale and sweating, she knew her father was wrong to move her so soon. But pride wouldn't allow him to admit it, and she lacked the strength to argue. As the ranch hands helped her into the wagon, Quinn approached, carrying a small bundle. "Clean bandages," he said, handing them to her. "And some herbs for tea that will help with the pain and prevent fever." Their fingers brushed as she took the bundle, and Eleanor looked up to meet his eyes. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." "Take care of yourself, Miss Adams," he replied, his voice equally quiet. She nodded, unable to find words for all she wanted to say. How could she explain that in the space of a day, this man had become important to her in a way she couldn't articulate? Andrew climbed up to sit beside her in the wagon, taking the reins from the ranch hand. With a flick of his wrist, they started moving, the jostling of the wagon sending waves of pain through Eleanor's wounded side. She looked back once to see Quinn standing outside the cabin, watching them go, his tall figure growing smaller as the distance between them increased. Something ached in her chest that had nothing to do with her physical wound. Eleanor wondered if she would ever see Quinn Atwood again. The journey back to the Double O was excruciating, each bump and dip in the rough trail sending shards of pain through Eleanor's side. By the time they reached the sprawling ranch house, she was pale and trembling, her dress damp with sweat. Dr. Mitchell, summoned from town in anticipation of their return, examined the wound with pursed lips. "These stitches are remarkably well done," he admitted grudgingly. Who did you say performed them? Quinn Atwood, Eleanor replied, wincing as the doctor prodded gently around the wound. The foreman at the broken spur. Well, he did a fine job, better than many medical students I've trained. The doctor glanced at Andrew. Though moving her so soon was unwise, the wound shows signs of stress. She should remain in bed for at least a week, preferably 2. Andrew had the grace to look chagrined. Will she be all right, with proper rest and care? Yes. Dr. Mitchell prepared a dose of laudanum for Eleanor. This will help with the pain. I'll leave more with instructions for your housekeeper. As the days passed, Eleanor's body healed, but her thoughts remained fixed on the man who had saved her life. She found herself watching the horizon from her bedroom window, hoping for a glimpse of a rider from the broken spur, but none came. Why would he come? She asked herself. Quinn Atwood had done his duty as any decent man would, saving her life and tending her wound. There was no reason for him to seek her out now that she was safely home. Yet she couldn't shake the memory of his gentle hands, the warmth in his summer blue eyes, the sense of safety she'd felt in his presence. A week after her return home, Eleanor was sitting on the veranda, enjoying the mild spring air, when she spotted a rider approaching from the direction of the broken spur. Her heart leapt before she could temper her reaction, but as the rider drew closer, she saw it wasn't Quinn. Disappointment settled heavy in her chest. The rider, a young man she recognized as one of the broken spur hands, dismounted at the hitching post. "Miss Adams," he called, removing his hat. "Mr. Blackwell sends his regards and hopes you're recovering well." "Thank you," Eleanor replied, forcing a smile. "Please convey my gratitude for his concern." The young man hesitated. "And, Mr. Atwood asked after you as well, wanted to know if your stitches were healing proper." Warmth bloomed in Eleanor's chest. "Please tell Mr. Atwood that I am recovering well, thanks to his skillful care." The doctor was most impressed with his stitching. The cowboy nodded, replacing his hat. "I'll tell him, he'll be pleased to hear it." After he rode away, Eleanor remained on the veranda, her thoughts full of Quinn. He had asked after her, he was still thinking of her as she was of him. That evening at dinner, her father noted her improved spirits. "You seem more yourself tonight, Eleanor. I'm glad to see it." "I'm feeling much better, Papa." She hesitated, then added, "A rider from the broken spur came today with well wishes." Andrew's expression darkened. Blackwell checking to see if his foreman's handiwork held up, no doubt. "Actually, it was Mr. Atwood who asked after my recovery." "That man again," Andrew muttered. "I don't like him taking such an interest in you, Eleanor." She set down her fork. "He saved my life, Papa. Is it so strange that he would inquire about my recovery?" "His kind always has motives." "His kind," Eleanor echoed, heat rising in her cheeks. "And what kind is that?" "You know what I mean. A man with nothing to his name but the horse he rides and the wages he earns. The double would be quite a prize for someone like Quinn Atwood." "That's unfair," Eleanor protested. "He never once asked about our ranch or showed any interest beyond ensuring my well-being." Andrew's eyebrows rose. "And what exactly did you discuss during your time alone with him?" Eleanor felt her face grow hot. "Nothing improper, I assure you. He told me about his family, how his father was a doctor before they came west. A likely story." "It's the truth." "Papa, why are you so determined to think the worst of a man who did me nothing but kindness?" Andrew sighed, his expression softening slightly. "I'm only looking out for your best interests, daughter. You're young and haven't seen the world as I have. Men can be deceptive when there's something valuable at stake." "And what about William Hargrove?" Eleanor challenged, referring to the banker's son her father had been encouraging her to consider as a potential match. "Is he not interested in the double as well?" "That's different. The Hargroves have their own wealth and standing. A match there would be advantageous for both families." Eleanor pushed her plate away, her appetite gone. "I'm not a business arrangement, Papa." "Of course not," Andrew said, but his tone lacked conviction. "But you must consider your future practically. The double will need a strong hand when I'm gone, and William has a good head for business." "And a wandering eye for every pretty girl in town," Eleanor muttered. Andrew chose to ignore that comment. I've invited the Hargroves for dinner on Saturday. William specifically asked after your health when he heard about the accident. Eleanor bit back a retort. There was no point arguing with her father when he'd made up his mind. May I be excused? I'm feeling tired. Andrew nodded, concern replacing his stern expression. Of course, don't overexert yourself, my dear. In her room, Eleanor stood at the window, looking out across the moonlit landscape toward the broken spur. Somewhere out there, Quinn Atwood was going about his evening, perhaps thinking of her as she thought of him. The dinner with the Hargroves was as tedious as Eleanor had feared. William Hargrove monopolized the conversation with stories of his business acumen and his recent trip to Austin, pausing only to shoot what he clearly believed were charming smiles in Eleanor's direction. And how are you recovering, Miss Adams? He finally asked, as if suddenly remembering why the dinner had been arranged in the first place. Much better, thank you, Eleanor replied politely. A terrible business, that Stampede, William said with a shake of his head. Lucky that broken spur fellow happened to be nearby. Yes, very fortunate, Eleanor agreed, her thoughts drifting to Quinn. Though I must say, William continued, leaning closer and lowering his voice to what he probably thought was a discreet level, there's been some talk in town about the propriety of your situation. Alone with a cowhand overnight, Eleanor stiffened. Mr. Atwood saved my life at great personal risk, Mr. Hargrove, and he is the foreman of the broken spur, not a mere cowhand. William waved a dismissive hand. Form and hand, it's all the same. The point is, people are talking. But never fear, I've made it clear to anyone who'll listen that I don't hold the incident against you. How magnanimous of you, Eleanor said, unable to keep the edge from her voice. William didn't seem to notice her sarcasm. Indeed. After all, you were unconscious for much of the time, from what I understand. Hardly your fault if this Atwood fellow took advantage of the situation. Eleanor's hands clenched in her lap. Mr. Atwood did nothing improper. He treated my wounds with the utmost professionalism and respect. Of course, William agreed, though his tone suggested he believed otherwise. Still, the fact remains that your reputation has suffered a bit of a tarnish. Nothing that can't be polished away with the right association, of course. The implication was clear. William Hargrove considered himself magnanimous for still pursuing her despite the scandal of her rescue, as if her near-death experience and Quinn's life-saving actions were something shameful. Before Eleanor could form a suitably cutting response, the front door burst open and one of the ranch hands rushed in, hat in hand. Begging your pardon, Mr. Adams, but there's trouble. Cattle rustlers hit the north pasture, took near 30 head. Andrew was on his feet immediately. When? Must have been earlier today. Jackson was riding fence and found the cut wire about an hour ago. We've gathered a posse to track them. I'll ride with you. Andrew turned to the Hargroves. My apologies for the interruption. Duty calls. Of course, Mr. Hargrove Sr. said, rising as well. We should be getting back to town anyway. William, help your mother with her wrap. As the Hargroves prepared to leave, William leaned close to Eleanor. Perhaps we could continue our conversation another time. I'll call on you next week, Eleanor forced a smile. Safe journey, Mr. Hargrove. After seeing the Hargroves out, Eleanor turned to her father, who was checking his revolver. Be careful, Papa, Andrew kissed her forehead. Always am. Don't wait up, we might be out all night if the trail is clear. After her father and the ranch hands rode out, the house seemed eerily quiet. Eleanor tried to read, but found herself unable to concentrate, her thoughts divided between concern for her father and lingering irritation at William Hargrove's presumptuous attitude. The sound of approaching hoofbeats an hour later brought her to the window. A rider was coming fast, and for a moment her heart leapt with the wild hope that it might be Quinn. But as the figure drew closer, she recognized Jackson, one of the newer ranch hands. She hurried to the door as he dismounted. What's happened? Is my father all right? Jackson removed his hat, his young face grave. Your father's fine, Miss Adams, but there's been gunfire. The rustlers are holed up in Cottonwood Canyon and they've got us pinned down. Your father sent me back to fetch more men and ammunition. How many rustlers? At least 6 that we could see. They've got the high ground. Eleanor's stomach twisted with worry. The double-O was short-handed with several men in town for supplies. Who else is with my father now? Just Peterson and Martinez. Jackson shifted uncomfortably. It ain't good odds, miss. We need more men. A crazy idea formed in Eleanor's mind. The Broken Spur is closer to Cottonwood Canyon than town is. Jackson blinked. Yes, madam, but ride there. Ask for help. But Mr. Adams and Mr. Blackwell, this isn't about their feud, Eleanor cut him off. This is about my father's life. Go to the Broken Spur. Ask for Quinn Atwood. Tell him Eleanor Adams requests his help. Jackson hesitated only a moment before nodding. Yes, madam. As he rode off, Eleanor prayed she'd made the right decision. Her father would be furious that she'd asked the Broken Spur for help, but his pride wasn't worth his life. It was the longest night of Eleanor's life. She paced the veranda until her side ached, then sat in her father's chair by the fire, staring into the flames and imagining all manner of terrible outcomes. What if Quinn refused to help? What if the rustlers killed them all? What if her impulsive decision made things worse instead of better? Dawn was breaking when she heard riders approaching. She rushed outside, heart in her throat, to see a group of men riding toward the house. Her father was at the lead alongside Quinn Atwood. Relief made her knees weak. "Papa," she called, hurrying down the steps. Andrew dismounted stiffly, and she could see he was favoring his left arm. "I'm all right," he assured her as she reached him. "Just a graze." Her eyes moved to Quinn, who sat tall on his horse, watching their reunion with an unreadable expression. Behind him were several Broken Spur men, as well as the double-O hands who'd gone with her father. "You're hurt," she said to her father, noting the makeshift bandage on his arm. "It's nothing serious." "Thanks to Atwood and his men," Andrew added, glancing back at Quinn with a complicated expression. "They showed up just in time, outflanked the rustlers, and drove them straight into our guns. And the cattle, we recovered most of them. They're being driven back as we speak." Andrew's gaze shifted back to Quinn. "I owe you my thanks, Atwood, and an apology for my behavior after you rescued my daughter. It seems the Adams family is doubly in your debt now." Quinn dismounted, removing his hat as he approached. "No debt, Mr. Adams. Rustlers are everyone's problem." His eyes met Eleanor's, and the connection between them was so palpable she wondered if everyone could see it. "Miss Adams," he said with a small nod. "Good to see you looking well." "Thanks to you," she replied softly. Andrew cleared his throat. "You and your men must be tired and hungry. Please come inside. Our cook can prepare breakfast." It was a significant olive branch from a man as proud as Andrew Adams. Quinn seemed to recognize it as such, for he inclined his head respectfully. "We'd be obliged, sir." As the men filed into the house, Eleanor fell into step beside Quinn, her heart hammering in her chest. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "I wasn't sure you would." "You asked for my help," Quinn replied simply, as if that explained everything, and perhaps it did. Over breakfast, the men recounted the confrontation with the rustlers. 4 had been captured alive and would face justice in Fort Davis. 2 others had been killed in the exchange of gunfire. "We lost Martinez," Andrew said grimly, and Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth in horror. She'd known Miguel Martinez since childhood. He had a wife and 3 children in town. "I'll see that his family is taken care of," Andrew continued. "He died bravely." The meal was subdued after that, the victory over the rustlers tempered by the loss of a good man. When the plates were cleared, Andrew invited the Broken Spur men to rest before their ride home. "There are spare bunks in the bunkhouse," he offered. "No sense riding back without some sleep." Most of the men accepted gratefully, but Quinn shook his head. "I should get back." "Mr. Blackwell will want a report." "Of course," Andrew nodded. "I'll ride into town tomorrow to speak with him personally about your assistance. Perhaps it's time to put old grievances to rest." Quinn seemed surprised by the gesture, but nodded. "He'd appreciate that, sir." As he prepared to leave, Eleanor followed him out to the porch, mindful of the ranch hands milling about but unable to let him go without a word. "Will I see you again?" she asked quietly as he checked his saddle girth. Quinn paused, looking up at her with those summer blue eyes. "Do you want to?" Yes, she admitted, throwing caution to the winds, very much. A slow smile spread across his face, transforming his features. Then you will. He mounted his horse with easy grace. Take care of that wound, Miss Adams. Eleanor, she corrected. Please call me Eleanor. His smile deepened. Eleanor, he repeated, as if savoring the taste of her name. Until we meet again. He tipped his hat and rode away, but this time Eleanor watched him go with hope rather than despair. Something had changed. The rescue of her father had altered Andrew's perspective on Quinn and the broken spur. And Quinn had come when she called, without hesitation. It wasn't an ending, she realized with growing excitement. It was a beginning. True to his word, Andrew Adams rode to the broken spur the following day to personally thank Samuel Blackwell for his men's assistance. When he returned, his expression was thoughtful. Old Blackwell isn't as unreasonable as I remembered, he admitted to Eleanor over dinner. We've agreed to put the water rights dispute before a neutral arbitrator instead of continuing to fight about it. Eleanor hid her smile behind her napkin. That seems sensible. And he's invited us to their spring roundup celebration next weekend. Apparently it's quite an event. The whole county turns out for the barbecue and dancing. Eleanor's heart leapt. Are we going? Andrew studied her face, his eyes narrowing slightly. You seem very interested, she shrugged, attempting nonchalance. It sounds like fun, and if you and Mr. Blackwell are burying the hatchet, it would be rude to decline. Her father wasn't fooled. This wouldn't have anything to do with a certain broken spur foreman, would it? Heat rose to Eleanor's cheeks. Mr. Atwood did save my life, Papa, and yours. Is it so strange that I might consider him a friend? Friend, Andrew repeated skeptically. Eleanor, I may have revised my opinion of Atwood. He's a good man in a fight, I'll grant him that, but that doesn't mean I consider him suitable for my daughter. I didn't say anything about, you didn't have to, I know that look, Andrew sighed. He's still a cowboy with no prospects beyond his monthly wage. You're the heir to one of the largest ranches in the county. Eleanor set down her fork. Is that all that matters to you? A man's wealth and position? Of course not. But these things do matter in a marriage. I want you to have security, stability. Like William Hargrove offers, she challenged. Andrew nodded. Exactly. William may not be perfect, but he could provide for you, give you the kind of life you deserve. And what if that's not the life I want? Her father frowned. What other life is there for a woman of your standing? Eleanor took a deep breath. I don't know yet, but I'd like the chance to find out for myself. Andrew studied her for a long moment, then sighed heavily. You're so like your mother, stubborn as the day is long. His expression softened. We'll go to the roundup celebration, but I expect you to behave with propriety. No wandering off alone with Atwood. Eleanor smiled, victory sweet. Of course, Papa, thank you. The week leading up to the roundup celebration passed with excruciating slowness for Eleanor. She found herself looking for any excuse to ride out on the property, hoping for a glimpse of Quinn, but their paths didn't cross. When Saturday finally arrived, she spent an unprecedented amount of time on her appearance, finally settling on a sky-blue dress that brought out the color of her eyes. Her auburn hair swept up in a style that was fashionable yet practical for an outdoor gathering. You look beautiful, her father commented as he helped her into the buggy. Every eligible bachelor in the county will be falling over himself to dance with you. Eleanor smiled noncommittally. There was only one man she was interested in dancing with. The Broken Spur Ranch was alive with activity when they arrived. Dozens of wagons and horses were gathered near the main house, and the savory scent of barbecue filled the air. A wooden platform had been constructed for dancing, and a small band was already playing lively tunes. Samuel Blackwell himself came to greet them, a burly man with silver hair and a booming laugh. Adams, glad you could make it, and this must be your daughter. A pleasure, Miss Adams. Thank you for having us, Mr. Blackwell, Eleanor replied politely, her eyes scanning the crowd for a certain tall figure. Please enjoy yourselves. Food's over yonder, drinks beside the dancing platform. We'll be starting the competitions soon, roping, riding, that sort of thing. Our boys love to show off. As Blackwell led her father away, presumably to introduce him to other guests, Eleanor continued her search for Quinn. She spotted several broken spur hands she recognized from the night of the rustler incident, but not the foreman, looking for someone. The deep voice behind her sent a shiver down her spine. She turned to find Quinn standing there, hat in hand, looking more handsome than she remembered in a clean shirt and vest, his sandy hair neatly combed. "Mr. Atwood," she greeted him, unable to keep the pleasure from her voice. "Miss Adams." His eyes traveled over her, appreciation evident in his gaze. "You look lovely. Thank you, and thank you again for helping my father last week. It meant a great deal to him, and to me." Quinn shifted his hat in his hands. "Your message said you needed help." That was all I needed to know. The simple statement warmed her from the inside out. "Will you be participating in the competitions today?" A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "I've been told it's expected of the foreman to show the younger hands how it's done." "Then I look forward to watching you." Their eyes held for a long moment until someone called Quinn's name from the direction of the corrals. "Duty calls," he said with a hint of regret. "Save me a dance later," Eleanor nodded, heart fluttering. "I'd like that." As Quinn walked away, Eleanor became aware of someone watching her. She turned to see William Hargrove approaching, a tight smile on his face. "Miss Adams, I didn't expect to see you here." "Mr. Hargrove," she acknowledged coolly. "I might say the same." "The bank has business with many ranches in the area," he explained. "One must maintain good relations with all potential clients." His gaze followed Quinn's retreating figure. "I see you're already renewing certain acquaintances." Eleanor bristled at his tone. "Mr. Atwood was kindly welcoming us to the Broken Spur." "Of course." William's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Your father mentioned you might join my family for dinner again next week. Perhaps Wednesday." "Did he?" Eleanor feigned surprise. "He hasn't mentioned it to me." William's smile faltered slightly. "Well, consider it an open invitation. I've been thinking a great deal about our conversation last week before it was so unfortunately interrupted." "Have you? I'm afraid it's slipped my mind entirely." It was petty, perhaps, but Eleanor couldn't bring herself to care. William Hargrove's condescension regarding Quinn still rankled. William's expression hardened momentarily before he forced his smile back into place. "Perhaps you'll remember over a dance. The music is quite good." Before Eleanor could formulate a polite rejection, a commotion near the corrals drew everyone's attention. The competitions were beginning, starting with bronc riding. "Another time, perhaps," Eleanor said, already moving toward the corral. "I promised my father I'd watch the competitions with him." She located Andrew among the spectators gathering around the corral and joined him, relieved to escape William's company. Her father gave her a knowing look, but said nothing as they turned their attention to the events. The competitions were thrilling wild horses bucking across the corral, sending cowboys flying. Cattle roping contests that showcased incredible skill with a lasso, races that sent dust flying as horses thundered past. Through it all, Eleanor watched Quinn, who participated in several events with a quiet confidence that set him apart from the showier cowboys. When it came to the roping competition, Quinn's performance was a masterclass in precision and timing. He finished with a time that none of the other hands could match, earning congratulatory slaps on the back from his colleagues and an approving nod from Blackwell. As the competitions concluded and people began drifting toward the food tables, Eleanor found herself separated from her father in the crowd. She was looking for him when Quinn appeared at her side. "Impressed?" he asked, a rare teasing note in his voice. "Very," she admitted with a smile. "Though I suspect you don't need me to tell you how skilled you are," Quinn shrugged. "A man likes to hear he's done well from a pretty woman." The compliment, casual as it was, brought warmth to Eleanor's cheeks. "Your roping was particularly impressive." "Where did you learn to handle a lasso like that?" "Had a good teacher when I first started. Old Mexican vaquero named Esteban. He could rope a fly off a horse's ear at 20 paces. Quinn glanced toward the food tables. "Have you eaten yet?" "Not yet. Allow me to fix you a plate." "The cook here makes the best barbecue in 3 counties. Eleanor hesitated, conscious of her father's warning not to wander off alone with Quinn, but they would hardly be alone at the crowded food tables. "I'd like that." They made their way through the throng, Quinn's tall presence beside her somehow both exciting and comforting. He was solicitous as he helped her fill a plate with sliced beef, beans, and corn bread, ensuring she had everything she needed before serving himself. They found a relatively quiet spot beneath a large oak tree to eat. Eleanor was acutely aware of the glances cast their way the double heiress and the broken spur foreman making quite the topic of conversation. She found she didn't care. "You seem at home here," she observed as Quinn leaned back against the tree trunk. "The broken spur's been good to me," he acknowledged. "Blackwell's a fair boss, gives a man room to prove himself. And yet you don't have your own spread." It wasn't a question, merely an observation echoing her father's concern about Quinn's prospects. Quinn's eyes met hers, understanding in their depths. "Not yet, but I'm working toward it. Have a piece of land picked out up near Coyote Creek. Another couple of years and I'll have enough saved to make an offer. You've planned it all out. A man should have goals," he hesitated. "Especially a man who might hope to have a family someday." The implication hung in the air between them, charged with possibility. Before Eleanor could respond, the band struck up a lively tune, and people began gathering around the dance platform. "I believe you promised me a dance," Quinn said, setting aside his empty plate and standing. He held out his hand. "Unless you've changed your mind." Eleanor placed her hand in his, feeling the calluses on his palm, the gentle strength in his fingers. "I haven't changed my mind." He led her to the platform, where couples were already twirling to the music. As Quinn's arm slipped around her waist, Eleanor was transported back to the cabin, to the moment he'd supported her as she sat up. The same strength was there, but now there was a different kind of intimacy in his touch. They moved together as if they'd danced 100 times before, Quinn guiding her through the steps with surprising grace for a man who spent his days on horseback. Eleanor was conscious of eyes on them, her father's concerned gaze, William Hargrove's disapproving stare, the curious looks of the other guests, but all that mattered was the man before her, his summer blue eyes never leaving her face. "People are watching us," she murmured as he twirled her. "Let them," Quinn replied, unconcerned. "Are you worried about your reputation, Eleanor?" The sound of her name on his lips sent a thrill through her. "No, are you worried about yours?" His smile was slow and warm. "What reputation would that be?" The confirmed bachelor. "The dedicated foreman with no time for courting. Maybe I just hadn't met the right woman to court." The simple statement, delivered without artifice or pretense, made Eleanor's heart skip a beat. "And have you now?" Quinn's arm tightened slightly around her waist. "I think I have." The question is whether she'd have me. Before Eleanor could respond, the music ended, and polite applause broke out around them. Quinn released her reluctantly as another tune began, a slower waltz. "May I have this one as well?" he asked, though his hand hadn't left hers. "You may have as many as you like," Eleanor replied boldly, not caring who overheard. They had just begun to move to the new rhythm when Andrew Adams appeared at Eleanor's side, his expression a mixture of concern and resignation. "Eleanor, my dear, I believe you promised William Hargrove a dance." It wasn't true, and they both knew it. Andrew's eyes flicked to Quinn. "Atwood." Quinn released Eleanor immediately, stepping back with a respectful nod. "Mr. Adams." Eleanor opened her mouth to protest, but Quinn caught her eye with a subtle shake of his head. This wasn't the time or place for a confrontation. "Of course, Papa," she said instead, forcing a smile. "Where's Mr. Hargrove?" "Waiting by the refreshment table," Andrew replied, visibly relieved at her acquiescence. As she allowed her father to lead her away, Eleanor glanced back at Quinn. He stood watching her go, his expression unreadable, but he lifted his hand in a small gesture of farewell. It wasn't goodbye, she told herself. Not really. Not when they'd just found each other. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of unwanted dances with William, stilted conversation with people she barely knew, and stolen glances across the gathering at Quinn, who seemed to be deliberately keeping his distance after their dance. It was late when Andrew finally announced they should head home. Eleanor searched the crowd one last time for Quinn, but didn't see him. Disappointment settled heavy in her chest as she climbed into the buggy beside her father. They had driven about a mile when Andrew cleared his throat. You and Atwood seemed quite familiar with each other. Eleanor chose her words carefully. We've shared some significant experiences. That tends to create a bond. A bond, Andrew repeated. Eleanor, I understand you feel gratitude toward the man. It's not gratitude, Papa, she interrupted, tired of pretending. I admire him, I enjoy his company, and yes, I care for him. Andrew was silent for a long moment. I see, do you? Because all you seem to see is his position, not who he is. Eleanor turned to face her father. Quinn Atwood is one of the finest men I've ever met. He's honest, hardworking, brave, and kind. Why can't that be enough? Because life isn't a romantic novel, Eleanor. Marriage is a practical partnership as much as an emotional one. Andrew sighed heavily. I only want what's best for you. Then trust that I know my own heart and mind. You're young. I'm 20 years old, Papa. Many women my age are already married with children. Andrew's hands tightened on the reins. And is that what you want? To be a cowboy's wife, living in some crude cabin, struggling to make ends meet? The image should have been off-putting, but Eleanor found herself picturing the simple domestic scene with a surge of longing. If it was with the right man, yes. Her father fell silent again, and they completed the journey home without further discussion. But as Andrew helped her down from the buggy at the ranch house, he surprised her by saying, "Invite him to dinner." Eleanor blinked. What? Atwood. Invite him to dinner next Sunday. Andrew's expression was one of resignation mixed with determination. If he's truly the man you believe him to be, I should get to know him better. Joy bubbled up inside her. Really, Papa, really? Andrew patted her hand. I can't promise to approve, but I can promise to try to keep an open mind. Eleanor threw her arms around her father, hugging him tightly. Thank you. As she prepared for bed that night, Eleanor's thoughts were full of Quinn and the evening they'd shared. The dance, the conversation, the promise of something more. Her father's unexpected invitation. For the first time since the Stampede, Eleanor felt truly hopeful about the future. The next morning brought unexpected visitors Samuel Blackwell and Quinn, arriving just as the Adams family was finishing breakfast. Andrew went out to greet them, curious and a little wary. Blackwell, Atwood, what brings you to the double so early? Blackwell dismounted, his expression grave. Trouble, Adams. We lost 24 head overnight, cut fence on the east boundary. Quinn here found the trail leading straight onto your land. Andrew stiffened. What exactly are you suggesting? Not suggesting anything, Blackwell said, raising his hands placatingly. Just stating facts. The cattle were driven this way. And you think my men had something to do with it? Andrew's voice had gone dangerously quiet. Eleanor had followed her father outside and now stood on the porch, watching the exchange with growing concern. Her eyes met Quinn's, and she saw the same worry reflected there. I think rustlers had something to do with it, Blackwell clarified. Same ones you had trouble with last week, I'd wager. Quinn thinks they might be using one of your old line shacks as a hideout. Andrew's posture relaxed slightly. The one in Willow Canyon, it's been abandoned for years. Blackwell nodded. That's the one. We'd like your permission to check it out. No sense riding in armed onto another man's land without asking first. I appreciate the courtesy, Andrew said, his tone softening. I'll come with you. Let me gather some men. As Andrew went to alert the ranch hands, Eleanor descended the porch steps to where Quinn sat on his horse, a little apart from Blackwell. Good morning, she said softly. Miss Adams. His tone was formal, but his eyes were warm. I'm sorry about the circumstances. Do you really think it's the same rustlers? Quinn nodded. The method matches cut fence, careful selection of the best stock, and the timing's right. They know most hands would be sleeping off the celebration. Be careful, Eleanor said, lowering her voice further. Those men killed Miguel Martinez. They won't hesitate to shoot again. Concern flickered across Quinn's face. You should stay here safe at the ranch. Eleanor was about to agree when a wild, reckless idea struck her. Actually, I think I should come with you. What? No. Quinn's response was immediate and firm. It's too dangerous. I know the territory better than any of you. I spent my childhood exploring those canyons. Your father would never allow it. I wasn't planning to ask his permission, Eleanor replied with a small smile. I'll follow at a distance. You won't even know I'm there, Quinn's jaw tightened. Eleanor, please, if anything happened to you, nothing will happen. I'll stay well back from any confrontation. She laid a hand on his arm, feeling the tension in his muscles through the fabric of his shirt. Besides, my father invited you to dinner next Sunday. You wouldn't want to miss that, would you? Surprise registered on Quinn's face. He invited me to dinner. He wants to get to know you better, she confirmed, unable to keep the happiness from her voice. Understanding dawned in Quinn's eyes. Because of us? Yes. A slow smile spread across his face, transforming his features in a way that made Eleanor's heart race. Then I definitely can't miss it. So we have an agreement. You'll let me come along today, and I'll make sure you're properly fed next Sunday. Quinn shook his head, the smile fading. No deal, it's too dangerous, Eleanor. These men are killers. Before she could argue further, Andrew returned with 4 armed ranch hands. We're ready, he announced, mounting his horse. Let's go find these rustlers and put an end to this. Quinn gave Eleanor one last warning look before turning his horse to join the group. She watched them ride out, torn between frustration and anxiety. The moment they disappeared from view, she made her decision. Running to the stable, she saddled her mare, a swift bay named Penny. Eleanor knew a shortcut to Willow Canyon that would allow her to get there ahead of the men, assuming they followed the rustlers' trail. She packed her father's spare revolver, just in case, and set out, staying off the main trails and keeping to the cover of trees and ravines whenever possible. The old line shack was exactly where her father had said, nestled in a small clearing backed against the steep wall of Willow Canyon. Eleanor approached cautiously, dismounting and tethering Penny in a grove of cottonwoods a safe distance away. On foot, she crept closer, staying low in the tall grass. Smoke rose from the shack's chimney, confirming someone was inside. A makeshift corral had been constructed behind the building, where Eleanor could see several cattle bearing the Broken Spur brand. She had just settled into a position with a good view of the shack when she heard voices approaching from the east, the rustlers returning, she guessed, not her father and the others. Pressing herself flatter against the ground, she watched as 3 men rode into the clearing, leading more cattle. Got 6 more from the Flying W, one of them announced to someone inside the shack. That makes 31 total, enough for a good payday. The door of the shack opened, and a 4th man stepped out tall and lean with a shock of white blonde hair. Something about him seemed vaguely familiar to Eleanor, though she couldn't place him. We move out at dusk, the blonde man said, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. I want to be across the border by morning. Border rustlers, then, planning to sell the stolen cattle in Mexico. Eleanor needed to get back to warn her father and the others about the rustlers' plans. She began to edge backward through the grass. A twig snapped beneath her hand. The sound was tiny, barely audible to Eleanor herself, but the blonde man's head snapped in her direction, his hand dropping to his gun. Someone's out there, he said sharply. Check it out. One of the other men dismounted, drawing his revolver. Probably just a deer. Check anyway. Eleanor froze, heart hammering in her chest. The man was walking straight toward her hiding place, gun drawn. There was nowhere to run without being seen. She drew her own revolver with trembling hands. She'd never shot at a person before, but her father had taught her to shoot since she was 12. If it came to it, she would defend herself. The rustler was less than 20 feet away when gunfire erupted from the other side of the clearing. Eleanor's father and the others had arrived, catching the rustlers by surprise, the man searching for her world around, firing back toward the newcomers. In the chaos, Eleanor began crawling backward, desperate to reach the safety of the trees. She had almost made it when rough hands grabbed her ankles and dragged her back. She rolled over to see the blond man standing over her, a cruel smile on his face. Well, what have we here? He drawled, kicking the revolver from her hand. A spy. Or just a nosy little girl in the wrong place at the wrong time. Eleanor tried to scramble away, but he hauled her to her feet, pressing a knife to her throat. Let's go introduce you to our visitors, he said, forcing her toward the shack. The gunfight was still in progress, bullets splintering the wood of the shack and pinging off rocks. Eleanor could see her father and the others taking cover behind boulders at the edge of the clearing. Quinn was with them, firing methodically at the rustlers. Hold your fire." The blond man shouted, pushing Eleanor in front of him, the knife still at her throat. "Or the girl dies." The shooting stopped instantly. In the sudden silence, Eleanor could hear her father's anguished cry. "Eleanor, drop your weapons and back away," the blond man ordered. "Or I'll cut her pretty throat." To emphasize his point, he pressed the blade harder against her skin. Eleanor felt a sharp sting as it broke the surface, a warm trickle of blood running down her neck. "Don't hurt her," Andrew called, his voice strained. "We'll do whatever you want." One by one, the men tossed their guns into the open and backed away from their cover. "That's better," the rustler said. "Now, here's what's going to happen. We're leaving with our cattle. The girl comes with us as insurance. Once we're safely away, we'll let her go." "You're lying," Quinn said, his voice carrying across the clearing. "You'll kill her as soon as you're clear." The blond man laughed. "Maybe, but it's the only chance she's got." Eleanor's eyes locked with Quinn's across the distance. She saw something there, a plan forming, a silent message. He gave her the slightest of nods. Understanding flooded her. He wanted her to create a distraction, to give him an opportunity to act. Taking a deep breath, Eleanor suddenly went limp in her captor's arms, as if fainting. Startled, his grip loosened just enough for her to slam her elbow hard into his stomach. The man grunted in pain, the knife wavering from her throat for just a second, but it was enough. Eleanor tore free and dropped to the ground as Quinn moved with lightning speed, diving for the nearest discarded weapon. Gunfire exploded once more. Eleanor scrambled toward the shelter of the shack, keeping low. A bullet whined past her head, embedding itself in the wooden wall inches from her face. From her new position, she could see Quinn and her father both firing at the rustlers, while Blackwell and the ranch hands moved to outflank them. The blonde leader was shouting orders, trying to rally his men for a retreat. One of the rustlers made a break for the horses, but a shot from Quinn dropped him before he reached them. Another fell to Andrew's gun as he tried to circle behind the ranch hands. The blond man, seeing his companions fall, suddenly charged toward Eleanor, clearly intending to use her as a hostage once more. She pressed herself against the shack, nowhere to run. A shot rang out. The rustler staggered, a look of surprise crossing his face as a bloom of red appeared on his chest. He toppled forward, landing in a heap at Eleanor's feet. Quinn was running toward her, his face a mask of fear and determination. Behind him, the last rustler threw down his weapon in surrender. "Eleanor," Quinn reached her, hands moving over her frantically, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt? Did he cut you?" She touched the small cut on her neck, her fingers coming away with a smear of blood. "It's just a scratch." Relief washed over his face, quickly replaced by anger. "What were you thinking, coming out here? You could have been killed." "I wanted to help," she said, voice small, "by getting yourself captured, by forcing us to throw down our weapons." Quinn's hands tightened on her shoulders. "Do you have any idea how terrified I was when I saw you with that knife at your throat?" Before she could respond, Andrew was there, pulling her into a fierce hug. "Eleanor, thank God, when I saw you in that animal's hands." He pulled back to look at her, his face pale. "What are you doing here?" "I thought you were safe at home." "I'm sorry, Papa," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "I wanted to help, and I thought I knew the area better than anyone." Andrew hugged her again, his relief palpable. "We'll discuss your disobedience later. Right now, I'm just grateful you're alive." He looked over her head at Quinn. "Thank you for that shot. It was perfectly timed." Quinn nodded, still breathing hard. Couldn't have done it if she hadn't created that distraction. Andrew's brow furrowed as he released Eleanor. Distraction. Quinn explained the silent communication that had passed between them, how Eleanor had understood what he needed her to do without a word being spoken. Andrew looked from Quinn to his daughter, a new understanding in his eyes. "You two, you understand each other." It wasn't a question but an observation and perhaps an acceptance. "Yes," Quinn said simply, his eyes meeting Eleanor's. "We do." In that moment, something shifted in Andrew Adams. He looked at Quinn not as a cowboy who had designs on his daughter, but as a man who had saved her life. Again. "Let's get these rustlers secured and the cattle sorted out," he said after a moment. "And then let's go home. All of us," he added with a meaningful look at Quinn. As they rode back to the double several hours later, Eleanor beside Quinn, the stolen cattle being driven ahead of them by the combined forces of the two ranches, she felt a sense of peace despite the day's dangers. "You're still coming to dinner next Sunday, aren't you?" she asked Quinn. He looked at her, his expression serious. "After today, I'd be surprised if your father lets me anywhere near you. You saved my life, again." "After you nearly got yourself killed by following us," Quinn pointed out, "and your father knows I encouraged you to stay home." "He also knows we work well together," Eleanor said. "You saw his face when you explained about our silent communication." Quinn was quiet for a moment. "What are you hoping for, Eleanor? Between us, I mean." The directness of the question took her breath away, but she answered with equal honesty. "Everything, a future together." He reined his horse to a stop, and she did the same. The others continued ahead, giving them a moment of privacy. "I have very little to offer you," Quinn said quietly. "A foreman's wage, the promise of a small ranch someday if my savings hold out. A life of hard work and uncertainty. And yourself," Eleanor added. "Your heart, your strength, your kindness. That's what I want, Quinn, not William Hargrove's bank account or anyone else's fortune." Quinn's eyes searched her face, looking for any sign of doubt or hesitation. Finding none, he reached across the space between their horses to take her hand. "Then I'll be at dinner on Sunday," he said, "and I'll speak to your father about my intentions." Eleanor's heart soared. "And what intentions are those, Mr. Atwood?" A slow smile spread across his face. "To court you properly, Miss Adams, if you'll have me." "I will," she said without hesitation. "I absolutely will." Sunday dinner at the Adams Ranch was a surprisingly pleasant affair. Andrew, true to his word, made an effort to know Quinn better, asking about his background, his work at the Broken Spur, his plans for the future. Quinn answered honestly, neither exaggerating his prospects nor diminishing them. When the meal was over, and Eleanor had tactfully excused herself to give the men privacy, Quinn formally asked Andrew's permission to court Eleanor. Andrew was quiet for a long moment. "You know," he finally said, "when Eleanor was first injured in that stampede and I heard a Broken Spur man had her, I was furious. Convinced you had ulterior motives." Quinn nodded. "I know, but these past weeks have shown me what kind of man you are. The kind who rides into danger without hesitation when someone needs help, the kind who puts others before himself." Andrew leaned back in his chair. "I still think my daughter could have an easier life with someone like William Hargrove." "Probably," Quinn agreed, "but would she be happier?" Andrew's eyes crinkled at the corners. "No, I don't believe she would." He extended his hand across the table. "You have my permission to court Eleanor, Atwood, but understand this: if you break her heart, there's no place in Texas you can hide from me." Quinn took the offered hand with a firm grip. "I understand, sir, and I promise you, I'll do everything in my power to make her happy." Over the weeks that followed, Quinn courted Eleanor with a dedication and sincerity that won over even the most skeptical observers. They rode together across the combined properties of the Double and Broken Spur, now working in cooperation since the Rustler incident. They attended church together in Fort Davis, shared meals with both families, and spent long evenings on the Adams veranda, talking about everything and nothing. William Hargrove made one final attempt to win Eleanor's affections, arriving at the Double with an elaborate proposal and a diamond ring that must have cost a small fortune. Eleanor declined graciously but firmly, making it clear her heart belonged to Quinn Atwood. As summer turned to fall, Quinn took Eleanor to see the land he hoped to purchase near Coyote Creek. It was smaller than the Double or the Broken Spur, but the valley was lush with grass. The creek provided year-round water, and the views of the distant mountains were breathtaking. "It's beautiful," Eleanor said, standing beside him on a rise overlooking the valley. "How much more do you need to save?" "About 8 months of wages," Quinn admitted. "The owner's asking a fair price, and Blackwell gave me a raise when he made me foreman, so I'm getting closer." Eleanor slipped her hand into his. "Have you thought about a name for it when it's yours?" Quinn smiled down at her. "I was thinking the double Q for Quinn and," she prompted when he hesitated. "And whoever might share it with me someday," he finished, his eyes holding hers. Eleanor's heart quickened. That's a good name, I like it. They rode back to the double in companionable silence, each lost in thoughts of the future, a future that, Eleanor realized with growing certainty, they both saw together. When they reached the ranch house, Andrew was waiting on the porch with a strange expression on his face. "Papa, what is it?" Eleanor asked as Quinn helped her down from her horse. "I've been doing some thinking," Andrew said, gesturing for them to join him on the porch. When they were seated, he continued, "The double is too big for one man to run effectively. I've known that for years, but I'm too stubborn to admit it." Quinn and Eleanor exchanged puzzled glances. "I've drawn up papers to create a partnership," Andrew continued. "I'm offering you a quarter share in the double A, Quinn, with the understanding that your role would grow over time." Quinn stared at him, clearly stunned. "Mr. Adams, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Andrew replied. "You've proven yourself a capable manager and a good man. The double A would benefit from your skills and," he glanced at Eleanor with a small smile, "I suspect my daughter would benefit from having you closer to home." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears of happiness. "Papa, do you mean it?" Andrew nodded. "I do. Of course, there's one condition." "What's that?" Quinn asked, finding his voice at last. "That you use part of your share to buy that land you've been saving for." Andrew's eyes twinkled. "A man should have something that's wholly his own, not just what his father-in-law gives him." The implication was clear, and Quinn's face broke into a wide smile. "I accept your conditions, sir, and your offer." "Good," Andrew said, standing. "We'll sign the papers tomorrow, and now I believe I'll leave you two to discuss what this means for your future." With a knowing smile, he disappeared into the house. Alone on the porch, Eleanor turned to Quinn, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "Did that just happen?" Quinn looked dazed. "I think it did." He took her hands in his. "Eleanor, this changes everything. I can buy the land now, start building right away. I can offer you," she pressed her fingers to his lips, stopping him. "You already offered me what I want most, Quinn, your heart." His eyes softened. "You've had that since the day of the Stampede. Since you stitched my wounds and never left my side," she whispered. Quinn cupped her face in his hands. "I never will leave your side, Eleanor Adams, not if I live to be 100. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket. "I was going to wait until I had the land secured, until I could offer you more than just promises, but now—" He withdrew a small object, a simple gold band with a single small diamond. "It was my mother's," he explained. "She sent it to me before she died last spring. Said she wanted me to have it when I found the right woman." Eleanor's breath caught in her throat as Quinn slid from the chair onto one knee before her. "Eleanor Adams, I love you with every breath in my body. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears spilled down her cheeks as she nodded. "Yes," she managed through the tightness in her throat. "Yes, Quinn Atwood, I will marry you." The ring slid onto her finger, a perfect fit, as if it had been made for her. Quinn rose and gathered her into his arms, his kiss a promise of all the years to come. They were married in the spring of 1873, when the wildflowers carpeted the hills around Fort Davis in a riot of color. The ceremony took place on the land that would become the Double Q, with guests from both the Double A and Broken Spur in attendance. Even William Hargrove came, gracious in defeat, offering sincere congratulations to the bride and groom. The small cabin Quinn had built on the property became their first home, though they divided their time between there and the double. As Quinn learned the intricacies of managing the larger ranch alongside Andrew. When Eleanor discovered she was expecting their first child the following winter, Quinn's joy knew no bounds. He spent hours working on an addition to their cabin, determined that their child would have a proper room of his or her own. Their son, Andrew Quinn Atwood, was born on a crisp October morning in 1874, with his grandfather pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door and his father holding his mother's hand through every moment of his arrival. "He's perfect," Quinn whispered, cradling his newborn son with hands that trembled slightly. "Eleanor, he's absolutely perfect." "Of course he is," she replied with a tired smile. "He's ours." As the years passed, the Atwood family grew. A daughter, Sarah, joined them in 1876, followed by twin boys, James and Joseph, in 1879. The double Q expanded as well, as Quinn gradually purchased adjacent parcels of land, creating a thriving operation that complemented the double A. When Andrew Adams passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1885, he left the majority of the double A to Eleanor, with provisions for Quinn's continued management. The two properties, while technically separate, functioned as one, with the Atwood family dividing their time between the main house at the double A and their beloved home at the double Q. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Quinn surprised Eleanor with a new house built on the highest point of the double Q land, with wide windows overlooking the valley and mountains beyond. It was grander than their original cabin, but still retained the warmth and comfort that had characterized their first home. "Do you remember when I first brought you here?" Quinn asked as they stood on the porch of the new house, his arm around her waist. "When I showed you the land I hoped to buy someday, I remember thinking it was the most beautiful place I'd ever seen," Eleanor replied, leaning into him, "and that anywhere would be home if you were there." Quinn turned her to face him, his summer blue eyes as bright and clear as they had been the day she first saw them. At 48, his hair was touched with silver at the temples, and lines fanned from the corners of his eyes, but to Eleanor, he was as handsome as the day he'd rescued her from the Stampede. "Any regrets?" he asked, a teasing note in his voice. "About choosing a simple cowboy over a wealthy banker," Eleanor rose on her toes to kiss him, a kiss as full of love and promise as their first had been. "Not a single one," she assured him. "You stitched my wounds and never left my side, Quinn Atwood. That's all I ever wanted or needed." As the Texas sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Quinn and Eleanor stood together on the porch of the home they had built, surrounded by the land they had nurtured, secure in a love that had begun in the chaos of a stampede and grown to encompass a family, a legacy, and a lifetime of happiness. And in that moment, as in every moment since Quinn had pulled her from the path of 1,000 thundering hooves, Eleanor knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be by the side of the cowboy who had saved her life and stolen her heart in one fateful afternoon all those years ago.